Rick, this is kind of fun here because we've got point counterpoint between the broadcasters and the CTI wireless guys. But in your opinion, Rick, do you think there's a spectrum scarcity, and how do you think this auction will impact the long-term spectrum demand?
Well, I think there's no question that the demand for data has gone up dramatically over the last several years. The iPhone changed the game. But I think as much as the notion about the demand for spectrum is the surprise that I think happened when the iPhone came on and folks had to figure out how to deal with the great rise in demand for data. So that led to a revolution there. I think the nice thing about this auction is that you actually don't need it to solve the problem. So for the auction will happen, it's a great market mechanism, as Rebecca said, to see if it's going to be more valuable in the hands of wireless carriers or the broadcasters. But what's happened in the last 3 years, I think, since the broadband plan was written, which was a groundbreaking moment, is the market has really shifted. If you look at the recent transactions, that I'm sure everyone on this webinar is familiar with, the market has found a way to deal with the surprise in data demand. So Verizon acquired the spectrum they did from Spectrum Co. AT&T bought up the entire rest of the WCS band. The FCC liberalized the rules there. T-Mobile got spectrum from Verizon, AT&T, and now is merging with Metro PCS. And Sprint, who was already in a very good spectrum place, given their position in Clearwire, took now a majority stake in Clearwire and is getting new ownership. So the market actually has reacted, I think, quite well to figure it out. Then we'll have the auctions on top of this, plus many other things going on at the FCC, like the AWS-4 proceeding, looking at federal spectrum and small cells. So it's an all of the above approach, and this is one piece of it. But I think we're not in a rush, I think, as people originally thought 3 years ago, because the market has done a pretty nice job of accounting for it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't kick him. I promised I wouldn't kick him. I mean, I would look at the same set of statistics from a completely different zip code or school district. I mean, as we, when we began this discussion 3 years ago about the looming spectrum crisis, Rick's right. I mean, we were just starting to absorb the iPhone. There was no such thing as a tablet. No one knew what mHealth was, or mobile education, or intelligent transportation. Or, I mean, you could sort of go on and talk about these verticals. I just, in the Ready Room, read an article from The Economist about the medical tricorder. It's the thing that was used in Star Trek to diagnose people, just putting it up to their face. And so, and there are 32 companies in a competition to see which can be the first to develop this medical tricorder. It's going to run on commercial spectrum. And so I look at those transactions, and in fact, it's 6 of the 7 largest carriers in the United States have been in spectrum transactions in the last sort of year, I guess you could say. And I say that's a perfect illustration of why we need to get spectrum to market, is that, yes, this can happen, but there's a finite number of these transactions that can happen before the supply runs out. And we're working from a fixed supply right now in the United States. At the same time that we're doing this, every major country on the planet is bringing more spectrum to market. So either it's a conspiracy within the US about this looming spectrum crisis, or it's a global conspiracy. I'm leaning toward this is a global issue, and it's being answered globally. And the FCC under Chairman Janikowski and the commissioners, the president in his State of the Union, the Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate agree. And how many times can you say that about any issue? We passed a piece of legislation that said spectrum needs to come to market, and we do. We need to get it to market. I mean, I disagree strongly with Rick's assertion that these transactions have stopped or slowed the need to bring this spectrum to market. I don't think this equation gets solved without this spectrum getting to market, along with government spectrum, but this is obviously a very key component.
Okay. And I would just add one thing to that. Luckily, we also at the FCC believe there is going to be increasing demand for spectrum, but compared to this debate here, we don't have to be right in terms of the amount. In other words, if we were allocating it separately, we would have to be right, because there's a high chance of inefficiency and being wrong. But by choosing a voluntary market-based approach, we just need to, if there's demand for 60 megahertz and 60 comes to market, then we have satisfied the demand. If there's demand for 84 or 120, then we've satisfied that. That's why we chose this approach, because we think that the voluntary auction allows the right amount of spectrum in the right markets to go to the right services at the right price. And we don't have to necessarily be correct down to the megahertz about what's going to happen in the future.
So Rick, before we move on to the next question, any final comments on the spectrum scarcity issue? from your point of view?
Well, I think, internationally, we're just ahead of the rest of the world. I mean, we had our digital dividend. We freed up a bunch of spectrum. We've been leaders in that area consistently. So that I think that there's no surprise that other countries are bringing spectrum to market now, because we already have, which is why we lead the world in 4G. So I think there's no question there. And again, to Rebecca's point, as long as the auction's conducted in a way that is designed to recreate the market, and not sort of squeeze, pick one technology or another, there's absolutely no problem with it. And going forward with it, it's the law, as Chris said. And I think on top of what's happened already, that's a nice, a nice redistribution if that's what broadcasters decide to do.